Welcome to a peaceful place. This short film is not about fishing. It's really more about observation, not falling in, wearing inappropriate clothes that get you into trouble with fishing guides in New Zealand, daft hats and waders that sag at the knees. You can never be a real wild trout fly fisherman without giving due attention to details like these. I come here a lot, perhaps too often. The trout in this small river are not big. A 10-inch fish is a good one, a 12-incher is something special, and anything bigger than that is probably a mirage. I know it's a well-worn fishing cliché, but size is most definitely not everything. Certainly not to me anyway. This river starts its life in semi-permanent snowfields in the remote corries of some of Scotland's highest and wildest hills, but from midsummer onwards it depends entirely on rainfall to maintain water levels. It can rise and fall spectacularly over the course of a few hours, and you really have to keep your wits about you while fishing here. I hadn't really thought about just how inappropriate the colour of fishing clothing can be until recently. Why do we buy these lightly coloured fly vests, waders, hats and stuff, then wander around the banks pretending the fish won't notice us? Maybe it's a fashion thing, but I seem to remember that back in the days I started fishing, waders and jackets were olive green. Does it matter? I don't know, but maybe it's something to think about. Just as I approached the water, I noticed a rise out the corner of my eye. I thought it was probably a small fish, but I had a few casts anyway. Second cast it took, and I was not disappointed. I was right, it was a small fish. But small or not, it was a real fish, and no less worthy of respect. My guess is fish don't swim around wishing they were bigger, they just got on with being fish. You might be wondering what's in that black holster hanging from my wading belt. Well, it's a wading staff, and it's not something I've bothered carrying until recently. The river changes in character just 100 yards upstream of here. It's fast pocket water, full of boulders, and is pretty lethal wading. I had a very nasty fall earlier this year, so now I carry the wading staff. We'll go up there later and take a look. Well, I fished away for some time here, and not much happened other than a small salmon jumping, possibly spooked on my light-coloured waders. I had to have a cast over him, no chance of him taking, of course, especially as he almost certainly knew it was a Sunday. But you have to try. To my mind, it makes fishing a pretty shallow experience of all you do is fish. I spotted Mum and 5 kids out for a swim while I was having lunch. They seemed a bit nervous. I blamed the high fashion fishing gear. They quickly headed off downstream. After lunch I moved upstream to the bouldery pocket water. Wading here really is quite tricky to say the least. I've had more baths here than I care to remember, and a fall in rocky shallow water like this really can be quite nasty. Unfortunately, the fish were not playing today. By this time of year, that's mid-September, dry fly fishing on these mountain streams can be a bit hit or miss. The water is starting to get cold and the main fly hatches are long over. Anyway, wading staff in hand, it was onwards and upwards. Some fly fishers have real problems when they come and fish water like this. If you're used to fishing bigger rivers with deep glides and riffles, you might be wondering where on earth fish would lie here. The answer is pretty much anywhere where the current is broken up and slowed down by the rocks. The rocks create calmer, deeper pockets that provide secure lies for the fish. You soon learn to recognise these fish-holding pockets. Areas of glassy-looking water both behind and in front of big rocks are a good place to start. Well, nothing doing here, let's dry up a bit. The most challenging part of fishing in complex currents like this is avoiding having your fly drag across the surface in an unnatural way. This happens when your line is drifting faster than your fly, and the best way to avoid that is to keep the line as short as possible, keep as much of it off the water as possible, and above all, keep the line that is on the water as slack as possible. The place for long, straight, tight casts is the casting demonstration pond and down at the local park, not in a mountain stream. You can see here that I'm casting and searching out any likely looking spot that catches my eye. If there are no fish rising, that's what you have to do. Most of the time the fly is on the water for only a few seconds before I have to cast once again. This is not a lazy way to fish. It may look erratic, but it works. Well, sometimes it works anyway. Now here's a great illustration of just how much of a difference trees can make to visibility. On cloudy days like this, when the light is poor and scattered, if you can find a stretch of water with a high bank or trees opposite, this can reduce the glare caused by the scattered light. Just look at the difference in the visibility between the water in front of the trees and the water in front of the gap. And that's the reason I don't fish with wet flies and nymphs on this stream from midsummer onwards. Salmon parrot are a real nuisance. I'm fishing with a pretty big foam cicada type pattern. Yes, I know we don't have cicadas in Scotland, but the fish don't seem to realise that. Now if I was using a small dry fly, or even worse wet flies, I'd be catching these par every other cast. As you can see, the oddman will still take the big fly, but for most it's too big and discourages them. They are astonishingly aggressive little fish, and anyway, the last thing you want to do would be to damage them, so it's better to take steps to avoid them in the first place. Well, stumbling on upstream, I am now wondering to myself why I was ever daft enough to wade this water without a stick. It really is lethal, and I had a bad fall just about here earlier in the year. I learned my lesson the hard way. Now that fish took the fly just into the fast water, above that round, light-coloured rock to my far right. I doubt if it was lying there. It's more likely it saw the fly and chased it downstream. Yeah, well, it's not exactly a monster, but a bright yellow true wild Scottish burn trout. A real fish. No stocking of farm trout has ever taken place in this river, nor should it ever. The trout in here more often than not have wide dark bands like giant bar marks. It really is a prominent feature of the fish in here. I've seen it written that this may be a sign of aggression, perhaps a signal to other trout to stay away. Knowing the colour of the riverbed, my guess is it may have more to do with blending in and being unnoticed. For me, fishing and searching out pocket water is far more thoughtful and satisfying than blind fishing over open water. If you approach a wide, featureless stretch and you can't spot fish or see them rising, what do? The fish could be anywhere or nowhere. You could sit and wait hoping for a rise to target, I suppose. I often do that, in fact. Or you could just fish blind and hope. Well, that's a bit too chuck-it-and chance for my liking, and it spooks more fish than it catches. In any case, I find it a pretty dull way to fish and quickly become bored with it. Well, I usually get a fish or two in this spot, but sadly not this time. In fact, that turned out to be it for the day. Just a few small fish to show for a lot of effort. But that's fly fishing. If it was always easy and predictable, it wouldn't be worth doing. Thanks for watching.